everyone, and welcome to our first 2017 webinar, The Evolution of Halo. You guys are definitely in for a treat today. As usual, I'm your host, Carmen Wilson, Halo Customer Advocate. Before I turn you over to today's presenter, Amanda Greer, I'd like to remind everyone that you can ask any questions in the GoToMeeting chat window, and they will be answered during the course of the webinar or at the end. We do have a couple of promotions around data quality and scheduled reporting and alerting, so reach out to me for more information. If you haven't done so, connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter and subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right, without further ado, Amanda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Carmen. Hi, everybody. I am Amanda Greer, Senior Product Manager here at Halo. And today I'm going to be covering the evolution of Halo. So what does that really mean, the evolution of Halo? Well, today we're going to cover a highlight of the features and capabilities that have been added to Halo since the rebranding in 2012. This will help you to understand where your current platform sits in the evolution of Halo, as well as review features that you might not have been aware of. Each time we have a product release, we cover the new features specific for that release. However, in this webinar, we are going to highlight the great capabilities that we have released since 2012, including the release of our data quality and predictive capabilities. Some of you might remember these products, which was Analysis and Data Server, and some of you actually might still be on those products. So this is what Halo looked like in the beginning of 2012. And this is what Halo looks like today in 2016. So how did we get here? In 2012, that is when we rebranded our company as Halo and went from Analysis and Data Server to Prism and Source. In 2012, we released features such as tab sets and KPI widgets on the Prism side. And on the Source side, we rewrote Data Server and released a lot of new capabilities in Source. In 2013, we added our Excel export feature, as well as horizontal scrolling, and focused on ETL optimization. 2014 was a big release for both Prism and Source, where we introduced pivot tables, Halo rings, and our first cut for the mobile UI. And on the Source side, focused on adding capabilities around analysis services. In 2015, we changed the way we did product releases and versioning. So in 2015, we decided that we were going to do 2 releases a year. Dot 1 represents the first release of 2015, and Dot 2 represents the second. So in 2015, we released features such as the new Prism Pane Edit, scheduled reporting and alerting, queue partitioning and change data capture on the Source side. And this is also when we started to introduce our data quality and predictive components. Then last year in 2016, we released the new time control, the Halo mobile app, as well as support for SQL Server Analysis Services tabular model. So I'm going to talk about a lot of these features and some of the ones I haven't mentioned already in a little bit more detail. So let's go ahead and jump into a deeper discussion of Halo Source, our data warehousing and ETL tool, and then we'll get into a demo of Prism. So Source 7.0 was not only a rebrand, but also a code refresh and rewrite. We added a new UI with a ribbon approach, as well as a lot of new capabilities over Data Server. We moved to using SSIS extraction instead of linked server, which gave us the option to do parallel extraction with dependencies. We also introduced data profiling, where you can now actually get a preview of the source data, as well as information about the data in the tables. The data search capability was added, and now you had a lot more flexibility on how to find specific data to bring into your project. So Source 7.0 was basically the first release of a brand new data server. In Source 7.1, we completed our migration, and any features that were in Data Server that did not make it into Source 7.0 were added. We also did some ETL optimizations, focused on usability enhancements, completed the self-documentation feature, and added some new data connections for MySQL and Providix. Source 7.6 was a big release, and this is where we introduced a lot of analysis services enhancements, such as slowly changing dimensions and support for many-to-many dimensions. We also added in a built-in cube browser so that once the cube was created and deployed, it could be viewed directly in Source. This was great, so it alleviated the need to go into Management Studio for data validation. We also added quite a few new data connectors like Dynamics AX, SAP, and SQL Azure. So now we get to Source 15.1, and that again is when we change the format of our release to denote that 15 represents 2015 and .1 is the first release of the year. So in Source 15.1, we added the ability to partition cubes for better performance and also change data capture for SQL Server. This is also the year that we added the Salesforce connector. So if anyone is looking to connect to Salesforce, which seems like a very popular request, you do need to be on at least Source 15.1. In Source 15.2, we completely rewrote the XMLA engine, which is the engine that does the cube generation. We also added cube linkage, which allows you to link multiple cubes together based on a measure group. What's nice about that is when cubes are linked, Prism sees it as a single cube, so it's a nice way to combine cubes for Prism usage. We also added the ability to enforce attribute relationships. Source 16.1 brought us Microsoft Analysis Services Tabular Model Support, which is another modeling option besides multidimensional. We also added a nice feature for SQL syntax highlighting directly in Source. So this is going to help a lot when writing native SQL in Source directly. In Source 16.2, we focused on the ability to connect to more data sources. We built a framework that will help us connect to more cloud-based ERP and data sources, as well as adding connectors for SAP HANA, Amazon Redshift, Dynamics AX7, and a full list of our connectors can be found here. We are also currently working on more for the next release of Halo, which is 17.1. Alright, so those were just a few of the highlights of Source over the years. It's not a complete all-encompassing demo, but hopefully gives you a couple of ideas of how kind of Source evolved over the course of time. So let's go ahead and jump into Prism and review some of the highlights that have evolved out of Prism for the past 5 years. I'm going to be demoing from Prism 16.2, so your specific version might look a bit different. But as I go through the features, I will mention which release they were in, so you can get an idea if you currently have this feature or if you need to upgrade depending on what your specific version is. Alright, so let's start with Prism 7.0. And I'm going to start with the feature that was first released in Prism 7.0, which is tab sets. We use tab sets heavily here internally at Halo, and I know that quite a few of our customers do too. But some of you might not even know that they're there. So before we had tab sets, views were looked at one by one. So I would have a view here, and if I wanted to look at another view, I would go into the tree, find my view, and select it. So that's fine if you're only looking at a couple of views, or maybe there's only one view that you work off every day. However, if you have multiple views for your department, or for a specific subject area, selecting one by one could be a bit tedious. With tab sets, which I will enable here through the Preferences option, I can group views into a tab set and have multiple views available across the top here. The tabs in Prism are similar to your internet browser tabs. And I can make a tab set with many views, like the one I have here, or just a few views as in this particular tab set. Tab sets are a great way to organize your views and roll out groups of views to your users. What is nice about tab sets is that you can choose if you want the time selection or the hierarchies to be linked between views that are coming from the same database. When I link my hierarchies together, it allows me to make a selection on one view in the tab set, here on West USA in our customer geography pane, and I can go to a different view and my selection is going to carry over. So if you have multiple views and want to analyze specific selections, you only need to make the selection once and it will carry over. The same goes for changing levels. Well, if I drill down on a level on this view, it will carry over to my other linked view. The colors on the tab set at the top represent views that are coming from the same database, and as such will have a linkage. So my views KPI and Sales Office Trends have the same color, so that gives me an indication that they can be linked together. The tab set controls on the upper right-hand side let me change between tab sets, link or unlink them, or create new ones if I have the correct user permissions in Prism. Tab sets follow the same folder permissions that views do when creating and providing access to tab sets. However, each user gets their own personal tab set that they can use to create their own grouping of views. Along with the tab sets in 7.0, we also added the KPI widgets, which we show a lot in our demos and are really good for understanding where a particular metric is compared to last year or a different time period. So moving on, one feature that we added now to Prism 7.2 is a one that's a bit hidden. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knew about it, and that is the horizontal scroll bar. So if you have specific panes like here in the bottom left, where you have quite a few columns but not enough space for them, you can enable a horizontal scroll bar in the pane edit. Now you might see a new pane edit here depending on what version that you have, but we'll be covering the redesigned pane edit a bit later in the demo. But both the new pane edit and the old one, as long as you have Prism 7.2 or higher, there is an option here for column width. And basically, if the column width exceeds the space of a pane, a horizontal scroll bar will turn on. So I'm going to go ahead and set the column width here to 100. And now we see with that a nice scroll bar appears to help me display the data. Another feature that was added around this time was interactive charting. So all of our charts you can click on to make a selection and then use the toolbar at the footer here to change levels or select all again. The majority of our charts, such as the pie one down here, are interactive. And if I happen to have the time dimension on a chart, when I select the chart, the time dimension will update. So in this example, I changed the time from August to May with the click on the chart. The Excel export feature has been enhanced over quite a few years. However, the first release of an enhanced Excel export was released in Prism 7.2. So when you export a view to Excel, most charts and graphs will export, and the only graphics that do not export are the ones that are not native to Excel, like KPI widgets and the map. KPI styles will export as well, and what is nice about the Excel export is if I right-click here on the tab here at the bottom, I can unhide the chart and the sparkline data. So the data behind the charts exports, and if I wanted to modify the chart, I can here by removing accessories and confectionery. And then if I go ahead and go back to my Excel document, my chart's going to update to reflect the changes that I made. So in 2014, we released Prism 8, and we had quite a few exciting features. One that I know was kind of a pain point for view designers was that before version 8, there wasn't a way to create a new view from scratch. We always had to start with a template, but with version 8, we got the ability to create a new view. So let me create one here really quick, and I'm going to use this new view of mine to show off the pivot table feature that was also released in Prism 8. It's been enhanced upon in later versions, but if you have the base version of Prism 8, you will have a base version of the pivot table. So the pivot table is here under the content menu in the other section. And when I drag this over, I get the pivot table editor to start building out my pivot table. The editor behaves very much like Excel, so it should be familiar to most of the users. So I'm going to grab some measures here and some hierarchies. And I can decide if the hierarchies are going to be on the columns or the rows, just using dragging or drop. And if you notice that as I'm building out my pivot table, it is updating automatically on the pane. So now let's say I want to bring in time to the pivot table, and add it as a filter. And now that I have a filter, I only want to look at the values for 2016. So now that I have my pivot table here, I can look at it with other panes in the view, or I can use it alone. I can also filter by rows and columns. So if I just wanted to look at the geography of the USA, I can select just that and then expand down to see the different levels of the hierarchy. In the pivot table editor here, I have some styling options such as how to display my totals and subtotals, and I can also add things such as banded rows and columns to help distinguish the data. Now, the pivot table in Prism is designed to be used within Prism itself to help with data exploration and being able to use data in a common framework that many users are used to. It is not designed to be a complete Excel replacement, so depending on the use case, it might still be needed to connect Excel to the underlying cubes for pivot tables directly. However, it does provide a lot of capabilities just using the pivot table directly in Prism. Prism 8 also brought Halo Rings, which is our embedded collaboration tool. Rings is available to everyone, but does need to be enabled by an administrator in the system menu. When it is enabled, a people icon will appear on the upper left-hand side toolbar and also on each view here. Halo Rings allows for users to collaborate and communicate on the data that is presented in each view. So users can ask questions, post notes or comments, or attach screenshots to the feed that is on each view. The upper left icon is the global notifications, so you can see any activity that is happening across all views in the system. There is an internal notification system, so if there's a new comment that's been made in a post, or you're specifically mentioned on a notification, the notification will appear to let you know that something new has occurred since you last looked at the feed. Users can also choose to set up email notifications as well, so if they're not in the system, they can still keep track of the activity that is going on. PDF export was also introduced in Prism 8, and it has gone through some performance optimizations in later versions as well. The PDF export is enabled in the System menu, and when it's enabled, an option to export to PDF will appear in the toolbar. The PDF report is nice as it exports all of the charts and graphs, including things like the KPI widgets and certain charts that Excel does not support. So I get a nice looking report here that includes all my charts and KPI styles. The Halo logo is here that can be changed to reflect your company logo. And once the PDF report is exported, you can download it or even email it out to someone. In Prism 8, we also introduced structured reporting. And it's an add-on capability that can be implemented through professional services teams. And it gives you a very nice structure to financial statements. So what is nice with the structured reporting in Prism is that it's completely interactive. So I have my income statement view here, and if I wanted to slice on individual departments, I can get an income statement for each individual department, all with the click of my mouse. The income statement can be exported to PDF or Excel as well. We also introduced around this time a couple of new chart types, such as a waterfall chart, which is really good at understanding things like cash position. So I can see where my starting cash is here at the beginning, additional revenue is here in green, and then after some expenses come into play, what my ending cash value is. The bubble chart was also added at this time. And what the bubble chart does is allow me to look at 3 measures at a time. So I can see which of my customers I have the most sales with, who has the highest margin percent, and then also how many units they are purchasing, as the size of the bubble represents the volume. After Prism 8, we're going to jump now to the 15 series, or basically when we start to do the new versioning with the year method. So we're going to start with 15.1. And what that did was brought us a lot of really nice capabilities, such as now we see the redesigned Paint Edit. The Paint Edit was completely redesigned to make view building a lot more easier by improving the navigation and design, and also by adding some new features. The Paint Edit is now displayed vertically down the page instead of horizontal. Any setting that applies to the entire pane is here on the top tab, and then each tab going down the page represents a column that is in the pane. And then here are all the settings for that particular column. Adding new columns is very easy, where I can choose to add a single or multiple columns before or after my current one. And I want to draw your attention here to the bottom right-hand side, where you see a bunch of icons. Each of these icons represents a chart that the pane can be changed to. So if you hover the mouse over the icon, it will have a tooltip that tells you the name of each chart, and you can see that the pane is completely interactive. So when I select a new chart type, the pane updates right away. This is very helpful, as the previous versions of Paint Edit, you had to close out of the Paint Edit completely before you saw any actual changes on the pane. With the new Paint Edit, we added more capabilities around charting, where I can control here the different colors of my chart, and also which columns explicitly are set to a secondary axis, as well as combinations of charts. So I can create a column and spline or column and line chart area, basically creating combination charts. Now there are a lot of capabilities alone in Paint Edit, and if you're not currently on this version and you're interested in learning more about it, I encourage you to go to the Halo support portal and browse the video section for the Halo 15.1 overview, in which we cover the new Paint Edit in more detail. And I will mention that here in the support portal, we do have all the video recordings of all of our previous releases, in which I do cover these features, a little bit in more detail. So if there was something that we've covered and you would like more information, definitely go review the initial webinar of that release. So one more thing to mention with the new Paint Edit before we move on is that you can also write some custom MDX statements that can add flexibility in Prism. This is definitely a more advanced feature, but what the MDX does is allow me to do things like list out the parent levels of my hierarchy like I see here. So I can see that not only the customer, but also which sales reps it belongs to, which sales office, and also the country. These are all levels within the actual hierarchy. You can also create different time periods, such as like year to date or any type of different time period that you'd like to display here. So Custom MDX can be an entire webinar on its own, but if you have any questions about it or interested in the capabilities, you can always reach out to our support team for assistance. But do know it was available starting with Prism 15.1. In 15.1, we provided the capability to save and edit the pane filters. Previously, if you did a filter, you would need to recreate it if you then wanted to go edit it, which I know was a big pain point for a lot of our customers. So here I'm going to set a filter on my customer's pane to only show department stores. Now I'm going to save my view, and let's say that I want to edit the filter and also add in resellers. I can do that now that I have the new option to edit the filters. Now that was a really basic example, but this will be very helpful for those of you who might have very complicated filters set up on your panes. You no longer need to recreate the filter in order to edit it. Now, another big component of Prism that was initially released in 15.1 and then extended upon in later releases is scheduled reporting. Scheduled reporting is a separately licensed component. However, I believe that quite a few customers do license this. And if you previously licensed Report Publisher, you are grandfathered into scheduled reporting. So scheduled reporting will allow you to take a view that is in Prism and have it sent via email to users on a scheduled basis. So here I have a weekly sales report that I want to send out to members of my department on a scheduled basis. The schedule can be daily, weekly, or monthly, depending how often you like the report to be sent out. So I'm going to go through setting up this report as an administrator and apply some security on the geography level here. However, if an administrator allows, power users can schedule their own reports and alerts. And when we go through the alerting piece in the future, I will go through that as the power user so you can see the difference. In 16.2, we changed the icons a bit. So scheduled reporting is under the share icon here. However, in previous versions, it's going to be under the paperclip icon. So let's get into scheduled reports. Here's the name of the report, which I can edit if I like to. I have two options for the report attachment, PDF or Excel. And I can choose whether you want your report to run daily, weekly, or monthly, or upon data refresh. Upon data refresh will most likely pertain to alerting, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So let's say I want a weekly report that occurs every Monday morning at 7 a.m. I can choose what I'd like in my email body here. And the text here in curly brackets are examples of parameters that can be included in the email body. So I'm also going to create a new recipient list. And since I want to secure the data based upon the hierarchy I saw in the view, I'm going to select from a recipient list, import hierarchy, and then select my customer geography. So now I have an option for the recipient for each of my geographies. So I can type in the email address of each user who is responsible for each region. So here, Jamie's the manager of Canada. Let's say Nate, he's down in Mexico. Paul's the manager over in APAC. And Brandon manages the US. So now I have my report and I'm going to create it, and now it's scheduled. So the report will look something like this. So here's an example of Jamie's. She's only going to get data for Canada since that's how I secured the data. The report's going to be sent as attachment, and then she can open up the data and see that she just has her Canadian data. So that's pretty much scheduled reporting as it is in Prism 15.1. And since we're here, I'm going to jump ahead a bit all the way to Prism 16.2 since we're on this topic. So in Prism 16.2, we added this one option here, which is the ability to embed the report directly into the email, so the recipient doesn't need to rely on the attachment. So if you select this option in 16.2, the email can look like this, where I see the report directly embedded in the email. So again, that was a feature that was added to 16.2. So if you use scheduled reporting a lot and not on 16.2, it might be a good reason to upgrade because users seem to really like the fact that the report's embedded versus the attachment. All right, so now let's move over to Prism 15.2 and talk about an enhancement to scheduled reporting, which was added, and that is alerting. Alerting is a bit different from scheduled reports, where a scheduled report is set to run at a specific time. An alert will trigger a report to be sent out only if a specific condition is met. So for this example, I'm going to go through setting up the alert as a power user. So basically, kind of what an end user would see. And if you have a system where data security is applied, each user is going to see different data based upon their thresholds and what they're allowed to see. So for alerting, it's more on an individual level versus a wider distributed level like scheduled reporting. Okay, so here I have an inventory report for a beverage company, and I want to know when my ending on-hand inventory is going to fall below 500 units. So I'm going to come in here, set up my report. This time for the recurrence, I'm going to set it to upon data refresh. So each time the data is refreshed, Prism will get a notification that there is new data and send off the report. However, we want to ensure it only sends when our threshold is met. So in the email, I'm going to keep the parameter for conditions data in my email body. And instead of the recipient list, I have first name, last name, and then the email I want it to go to, which is myself. So once I create the report, I'm going to get a new option here for manage conditions. And when I click in here, I want to set my alert based upon the data in the view. I'm going to select my ending on hand column and then set the condition to be less than 500. Once that is created, and if the condition is met, I will get an alert that looks like this, where it shows me all the distributors that are going to have less than 500 units ending on hand. So now I can review my list and determine if I need to ship them more cases. So alerting is a great way to get exception-based reporting, or if there's any type of information that you just want to get automatically when it occurs versus going to check Prism all the time, alerting is a great way to set that up. In Prism 15.2, we added some new visualization capabilities, such as the text box, which you can see here. The text box can be used to describe the data on the view or give context to what the view is designed to accomplish. We have some options to display some data in there, as well as some text styling options, or you can also include hyperlinks as well. We've also added the ability to create these chart tiles here, where I can set up a chart and define the header to call out a specific measure, such as total spend is 7 million, and then a KPI indicator to let me know if I'm trending up or down compared to last year. All right, let's move on and talk about some changes we added to the admin module. ViewMapper is the new way to import views and lets you take a view and easily map it onto a different cube. Before ViewMapper, if I were to take this view and connect to a different cube through View Properties, Prism would basically put the hierarchies in a best guess scenario, and more often than not, the new view would need a lot of work in order to make it usable. However, with the ViewMapper, I can take this view and either import it, if I'm moving between systems, or I can remap it directly in Prism. And I can tell Prism exactly where I want the hierarchies to be placed. So I have this view here, but I'm going to go ahead through the process of importing into the system and changing it to a different database. And ViewMapper is going to walk me through the exact steps that I need to take. The original database here is Demo Coffee, but I'm going to change it to my customer profitability database and cube. Here on the map connection step, it has automatically done a good job of matching up the original database with the new one. However, I can make changes, such as if I wanted my view to look at margin instead of revenue, I can make that change. For customer type, instead of channel, let's say I want it to be brands. I can just go ahead and make the change here, and then I'm wanting to import, I select next, and Prism will update my views. And then the view is imported. When I go to pull up my new view, I am now looking at a view connected to the customer profitability cube. My view looks nice, it works, and now I'm looking at margin instead of revenue, and down here on the right hand side where customer type was, I now see brands. So the ViewMapper is a great way to import views, especially if you needed to share views, maybe between us here at Halo and yourself, maybe even between different customers. You can now share views and easily map them onto different databases and make the views easy to use right away. Let's move on now to 2016 and cover the new features that we actually released last year. So in 16.1, we added data tiles here, which is basically a great way to display a specific measure in a tile format. And you can also color code the tile based upon a KPI. We added a new tree map visualization, which is a great way to highlight problem areas. So we can see right away which customers I have the least amount of margin with, since they are the ones in red, and the green ones I am doing very well with. The size of the box is going to represent the amount of sales that they have, since we're also looking at revenue. So it's a great way to kind of look at two measures at a time and highlight your problem areas. We also rewrote the drill through window. So it's a completely new component, and the export to Excel now does not have the previous limitation of using 2003 for the export. So you can now export as many records that today's Excel can support. So I know this was a very big pain point for a lot of customers too, but now it's completely rewritten and very nice UI. We also updated the time control. So that has a much nicer look and feel. So instead of the drop downs, we have a display here where I can simply select a button to change out my time. Then at the date level, I have a calendar display. So that is really nice to be able to select from a calendar view versus searching for my specific date from a drop down. We also added a few options down here that you can set to display the time dimension in very specific ways, such as showing range only, showing the current year, setting past and future periods with the horizon. And there's also some quick change buttons here at the top. So if I wanted to move quickly from one date to the other, I can just go using these arrows. So the new time control will work on any time dimension. It can be regular or fiscal. Basically, the time dimension display is just going to map on to whatever the time dimension you have in your cube is. But hopefully your users will like it a lot better, and it's a lot easier to use to change out time. All right, let's wrap up the Prism side of this with some of the features that we just released in November, which is Prism 16.2. You might have already seen this Google map here. So we have the option now to use either a Google map or a Bing map. If using Google, there is an option to put sizing on the locations. So the color is my KPI variance, and the size represents the revenue for the location. So the larger the bubble, the more revenue that location is bringing in. And we can see that for Atlanta Home Centers, this location is large in revenue, but it's down compared to last year, so we probably need to pay attention to that location. Breadcrumbs were added here in Pane Edit. So if I come in here to my Pane Edit, there is an option to enable breadcrumbs. And when I enable that, as I start to drill down here through the hierarchy, I get a breadcrumb trail here at the top. So this shows me exactly where in the hierarchy I came from. And if I wanted to jump to a level, I can automatically by selecting state here, for example, and then I'm going to be on the state level. If I make a selection and drill down, my selection will display here in the breadcrumb. And if I make a multiple selection, both selections will appear. So breadcrumbs are a really good way to enhance the navigation in Prism and can help users understand where they are in the hierarchy path. We also added the ability to share Prism views with other users of Prism. So there's a new share icon here in the toolbar, and when I click on it, I can get the URL for the Prism view or email it directly to another Prism user. Any selection that you make on the view will carry over to the URL. So I can make a couple of selections here and then share that view, and the recipient will see the exact same selections that I made. So a really great way to share views between the users, especially if you've defined, a problem and you need somebody else to take a look. You can just share out the view exactly as you see it with another. All right, we're going to finish up Prism with the mobile app. And this was released in November as well. The Halo mobile app is available today to download in the Apple and the Android stores. When you initially download the app, there are some sample views that you can browse through to learn how the app works. In order to connect the mobile app to your own internal Prism system, you must be on Prism 16.2, and some configuration is needed on the Prism instance. So our support team is available to assist you with that if you think you might want to move forward with Halo Mobile. So here's the app. It does rely on tab sets for view navigation. And so here I have my tab set and then all the views that happen to belong to this particular tab set. When I select my KPI view, the view will display. And as I scroll down the page, all of my panes in the view are here. The time control is in the toolbar. So if I wanted to change out my time period, I can just open the time control, change the month, and now I'm looking from April to May, and my view was updated. The panes are still interactive in mobile, just like they are in Prism. So I can expand a pane and perform actions such as slicing and changing levels. And now the rest of the panes have updated to reflect the selections. The info icon on the toolbar will open a sidebar that will show any selections that I might have made. If I wanted to clear out my selections, I can simply hit this revert button and the view will go back to its original form. The mobile app is designed for ease of use and getting to information quickly. It does not allow for view editing, creation, or heavy analysis, but you can still use a browser on your mobile device to access the standard Prism user interface as well. However, when you're on the go, on a mobile device, or even on a smaller device, the new mobile UI is a great way to get access to your information quickly. We're going to finish this webinar with talking about a few add-on components that we started to release in 2015. These features are add-on modules, so they're not released with Prism itself, but you are going to use Prism to interact with them. The first one is data quality. This has been available since 2015, and the data quality module will allow you to correct issues with your data directly in the tool. So while you can have data quality issues in almost any database, a common one is a CRM system where you can end up with duplicate customer accounts, duplicate geographies, such as what I have here. So this data is actually coming from one of our old CRM systems, and you can see that users keyed in state information all different ways. So I have for Massachusetts. Sometimes I have a state abbreviation, sometimes it's the whole name, but it's really not giving me an accurate count of how many customers I have in each state because it's split out over multiple records. So what the data quality module lets me do is actually combine and cleanse the data within Prism. So we can see for Alaska, I have the full name here and also the abbreviation. And I'm going to combine these records into one by selecting the combined items, and I want to put them all into the master record of Alaska. I'm going to apply the substitution, and now I see that for Alaska, I have my total of 35 records, so it's giving me an accurate count. The substitutions are writing back to the cube, so the updates will be reflected throughout the data. Another common issue that you might have are spelling mistakes. So we can see here that Beverly Hills is spelled incorrectly. So I just want to rename it and spell it correctly. I'm going to tell the system that each time a record comes in with this misspelling, go ahead and automatically change it for me to the correct spelling. Or if you just want it to be a one-time thing, you can say no, just make this a one-time change. All of the substitutions are tracked here in the audit table, so I can see who is making the changes and which changes they're making. And also you can revert a change if one is incorrect. So there is a tracking on the original data record, so you can revert a change if needed. All of the changes that are made in the data quality module are stored in a separate table in SQL. So if you wanted to then reconcile the changes in the data quality tool with your source system, you then have that ability. Let's move over to Halo Predict. Halo Predict provides the capability to do forecasting all within the Halo platform. For now, the forecasting component is set up in Halo Source, the prediction is run, and then I can view the results here in Prism. We have a variety of algorithms that Halo Predict uses, including a tournament which runs a series of algorithms against each time series and then picks the best one for that particular combination. This particular example, I happen to be forecasting sales of beer products by distributor and product. However, we can forecast any measure that has historical data, such as units for sales and operations planning or revenue for territory planning. Also, different combinations of data can be forecasted, such as customer by product or region, or brands by distribution center. The forecast can also be done at any level of granularity in the data. In this example, I see my historical data going back to 2013, and then my forecast is starting to come in here at May of 2015. So I can compare my actuals versus the forecast, and then once I hit November, I only have forecasted values since no actual data has yet occurred in this example. Another way to look at the forecast is here, where the red dotted line is my 2015 forecast, and I'm showing the previous year's history. I can also select a product brand, such as Pilsner, and see the forecast for my distributor by brand. What is nice about Halo Predict is that once the forecast is run, business rules and logic can then be applied to modify the forecast if needed. So if you knew that a certain promotion was going to happen in the future and you wanted to make an adjustment to the forecast, that can also be done directly in Prism. Here we see that for May, my forecast of Pilsner is about 10,000 cases, but I think we're actually going to sell about 15,000 cases. I can adjust the forecast directly in the tool. So now we see that my forecast is showing 15,000 cases. So that's Halo Predict in a very, very quick review. We will be enhancing the product in 2017. Some new exciting changes will be coming to Halo Predict in the future, and then we will be having a future webinar for Halo Predict. So if that's anything you're interested in or have more questions, definitely please let us know. All right, a couple of important notes here. The current version of Halo is 16.2. The Halo mobile app is available on Google Play and the iTunes Store now. But please be aware that in order to connect the Halo app to your Prism instance, you must be on 16.2 and additional configuration is needed. Downloads, documentations, and videos are on the support portal. If you do not have access to the support portal, please contact supportna@halobi.com and they will go ahead and get you set up. The official supported versions of Halo are 16.1 and 16.2, meaning that those are the ones that we will provide service packs and hot fixes for. Technical support, application support will be provided on any version. And then if you're interested in upgrading your Halo environment or would like more information regarding any of the features and capabilities you have seen here today, please contact Carmen Wilson at carmen.wilson@halobi.com.